Talking a lot about the production process of me. I will show you a few things right now. Let's start off with the beats, because that's always the thing that I like to start with when I start a new project. So let's just dive into my DAW, which is Logic, as you know. And as I've told before, you can see here that this is my starting template. So I'll just delete this one. This is my starting template. I always like to use with just one kick on grid. I connect one plugin, which is this one, and as you can hear, it just has one kick. So what I always do when I start with beats, I just start throwing in things actually. So maybe we can go to another pack. Well, I don't know, let's take this one, the Vengeance one. It's one that everyone knows probably. So percussion. This is what I meant with you have to go through all those freaking samples before you find anything. If you just use your own bank, you will probably be there already. But let's just take one of this. Just to give you an example of how I work, I just throw in samples. And I just throw them on the grid. Already added them a little bit in the audio. This is a nice one. As you can already notice, it's just a quick fix, as in you just add all the things you need as soon as possible. Oh, my mouse stopped working. That is great. Let me just wait until it's back. Yay, Apple. Okay, let's just go in back for a hi-hat symbol here. I always like to use closed hi-hats. Just take this one, put it on the upbeat. As you can already see, it's just looping and looping. I think the tempo can go up. Okay, so we have the hi-hat right now. To me, I always go to the claps, maybe even a snare, but let's just head off with this one first. No, it's too casual, it's too standard. No, I'll go for a snare here. There's so many snares in here, with so many trash. This one's pretty okay. And as you can see already, I'm just building a loop, a short loop. Oh, this one's a little bit off. Let's just copy this one. So now I've already set out the groove, you know. So I already determined what the groove's gonna be, and I think like, okay, this is okay. I can work with this right now, and from here on, I can continue working on the melodies. And as soon as I have the melodies, I'm gonna have a second look at, okay, the samples that I've used here. So let's say this hi-hat. Oh, this tom, sorry. Is this the tom that I want, or do I want to create a better sample? Because this simply isn't gonna do the thing that I would like it to do. So first, just make a quick draw and just put in everything you can find to create that flow and to create that vibe. And as soon as you have like a short loop like this, I instantly start working on a melody, because when you already have the melody and the beats, you can finalize everything afterwards and make things better afterwards. But you have the main idea, like the main thing, already there. So you save up a lot of time by, I could go into mixing the hi-hats right now, but that would take up like 10 minutes, 12 minutes, and I could use those 10 minutes better to create a melody and to make a better melody in the end, because that's really important. But mixing those hi-hats could be done in the end of the day when you're a little bit more tired, or maybe even tomorrow when you have fresh ears. But it's not necessarily a thing that needs to happen right at the beginning, in my opinion, because it's just the beginning of the project, you know. You never know where you're gonna end up. So keep things open and clear, open-minded. Just make a few, just pick a few samples and create a quick loop, and start working on the melody from there. So to me, when it comes down to creating melodies, I've always been kind of a noob, because I didn't know how to play the piano, I didn't know how to play the guitar, or I couldn't read any notes, you know. So I did everything I did by just listening and by judging if I liked it. That was the only thing, that was the only way I knew how to make music, because I didn't know what a C note was, I didn't know what an F note was, I didn't know what major was or minor or all those theoretical things. I just learned making music by doing, actually. And of course I listened to a lot of different music in my life on the radio and CDs and all this stuff, so I knew how things should sound, and that was my reference at that time. So when I started making music, of course I had a keyboard, but I didn't use it because I couldn't play it. Actually, I just used it to fuck around a little bit, but I didn't use it to play because I wasn't able to play. But let me just show you a few things of how I did work, and I want to show you this by showing you one of my projects that I've been using lately. So here we have the kick, as you can hear. And what I always do to create a melody is actually just like this. You see, it's really easy. It's just creating some kind of rhythm with one note or maybe a few notes, doesn't really matter. This one's a little bit shorter than this is, but I just started creating a rhythm. And if you ever listen to a few of my older tracks, or actually most of my tracks, you'll probably notice that there aren't that many melodies in it, because I'm not that good at melodies. Like, my powerful point was the beats and the energy in the track, but creating melodies, and especially like the chords, I really sucked at doing that. So that's why I never used it, because I just wasn't able to do it. But if you ever listen to Life is Calling, which I did with Kill the Buzz, he is really good with piano, and he's really good with playing with chords and creating chords. And that's the reason why that track is sounding so completely different than my normal tracks, because he was the one that spent all the time working on the chords, and I was the one that was working on the mix and the energy and the arrangement and all those kind of things. So that was the powerful combination between us two. So when I was working on my own tracks, I was always struggling creating melodies, and that's why I most of the time just ended up with a simple bleep or a simple plug or one of those things. So let me just show you an example of how I used to work. This is one of the things. I had the kick and I have this, and I just started working just a simple high note there, and I just start browsing through all those presets, you know, see what happens. As you can see, all these sounds are pretty crap. This one's pretty cool. So I started to decide to continue working with this. So that's actually the way that I always create my melodies. I just create a rhythm by drawing them in with my hand, because I wasn't able to play the piano. I just draw them into the computer with my mouse into the piano board, the piano roll. And from there on, I just kept on shifting with keys, you know. I just put them a few up, I just put them a few down, maybe even a chord up or a chord down. But in the end, it's just messing around and see what works, because I didn't know what to do. Sometimes you come up with a lot of great ideas, and sometimes it just sucks, you never know. but most of the time I ended up with just a simple plug, or maybe like this, a one key plug that just keeps on going, and you create a rhythm with it, so it really fits into the track. So to give you an idea what you can do with just a simple melody like this, could be this. You open up the release and you open up the cutoff. Add a little sweep. And then when I had this, like I need to have something more, of course. I need to have a bass line as well. And when I had this, I started to work on the bass line, and I was just jamming on my keyboard, as in just seeing which notes worked with the thing that I heard, and just see what sticked with me, you know. So if you have a look at this, you can see this. It's also pretty simple. It's just 2 notes actually, and it's in a different kind of rhythm. But if you listen to it together, it still sounds like a combination, and it's still pretty simple, but it's different. Let's hear it. So that's how I always like to use. It's not really something deep or something special. It's just someone who doesn't know how to create melodies because he didn't have the knowledge, and he had to find a way to create things. So keep it simple and keep it stupid, I always like to say. Just a simple note, start messing around with things. Of course it's different when you know how to play the piano, because then you're able to create sick chords and to create sick melodies. But for me, this is always the way that I like to work. Just pick a preset and just go through all the sounds until you found someone that you really liked, and you're able to change the sound afterwards as well, of course. But just to work around with, you have to pick one preset and find your sound, and maybe tweak it afterwards to get a better, professional, more sounding fat sound actually. When it comes down to arranging a track, I always normally I always like to start in the same way, you know, like in a normal dance track there aren't that much elements, so it's actually just all about building a story with, like, let's say 5 key elements, and that's also why I always use the 4 to 5 buses. It's just the beats, it's the bass, it's the melodies, and it's the effects, and maybe there's a second layer for melodies or the break or whatsoever. But to me there's always just 5 key things that I always use to create my arrangement, and I always want to hear the end result as quick as possible to get any idea of how things should sound in the end. So the drop, for instance, that was the most important part for me. So that was the first thing that I always started working on as soon as possible. So let me show you one of the examples in the project that I've shown you before. Like you've heard in the previous one, I've built this. But I want to know how this works out when I create a build-up and when I create like a drop. I want to know where this goes. Of course it doesn't have to be that perfect, or it doesn't have to be mastered already or mixed already, but I do need to get the idea, and I do need to get the way of where it goes. So I always try to build the build-up as quick as possible. And here's one of the examples that I used. So here's the sound that you've been hearing. Oh, this one. And I already started using, oh, my mouse quits. I also already started to sign in those things, to automate those things. As you can see here, I automated the filter and the cutoff to create that enormous build-up that I'm always looking for. And then you already have like an idea what this track, where this is going, you know, like when I have that simple melody, or if you can call it a melody, like that stab, you have that simple stab and you have that kick, it kind of gives me an idea, but I want to hear the build up in front of it as well to see how the drop will end up in the end. So that's why I always build like this. And from there it's just simply shifting things around, you know, like taking blocks, copying them, pasting them, and just quickly build a story. So let's say I have to build a new story here. I'm just gonna take the kick and all the other beats that I already have. So this could be the intro, just for 30 seconds, then you take out the kick for a little bit, and then you continue doing this again. And from here, you could copy this, for instance. Let's see if it works here. I guess so. Copy. And take this here, take out the kick here. The bass line goes here on the first like drop. And then you just go, if you listen to this, I have already built like a minute and 8 seconds here. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's like a minute and 8 seconds, and this is just a quick storyline. You have the intro for the, of course you need to spice things up. And then you go in here. Oh, should be there. This goes here, move. And of course you can do this. Let's see what I've been signing in here. You take it out here, the kick. So first build up when you mix it in. So that's already the first minute, you know, and then it's all about looping this, like making sure it's like some kind of logical story. Looping this, maybe add the clap later, right here. So if you get this. So when you start your project and you have all the elements you think you need from the beginning, so let's say 5 to 6 elements, you can already start working on your arrangement, and you're probably gonna add tons of stuff afterwards, but the big storyline has already been created. So where's the intro, where's the first drop, where's the breakdown, where's the build up, where's the second drop, and where's the outro. You can already build this with just a few elements, as you can see. And when you have set out this, like the big guideline, from there you can add more instruments, so maybe more percussion, maybe another melody, maybe you should change the preset, or maybe add your own sound to it. Add a lot of FX and fill-ins and all those things to make things a little bit more better. But just when it comes down to arranging, you can do that already with like 4 to 5 key things, and just push it out as quick as possible. So you already have a storyline and you can just start drawing it in. You already know what you have. You have the canvas, and you can start drawing in all the empty spots. So that's the way I always like to work, and maybe it works for you as well, so I would recommend to try it. So as many of you probably know, and I can really recommend you to do this, like shaping your sounds is like the juice on your food, you know, like you have your potatoes and you have your meat and your vegetables, but the thing that really makes your food delicious is the juice and the sauce that you add at the end. That's, in my opinion, the same thing with music production. If you don't shape your sounds, or if you don't make them more perfect, your track won't be that good. And it's the same with cooking, cooking food actually. So yeah, I just wanted to show you how I always used to do this, and things that you could do to make your track sound better, or to shape your sounds, or to create different kind of sounds. So here's a few tips and tricks from my side. I'll just take you into the project that I've been showing you before. So let's dive into this. I'm just gonna loop the first thing, just the melody actually. If I can find it, it's probably here. Yeah. Okay, so as you can see here, I already added a verb and a delay. But if you listen to the sound like this, it sounds pretty dry, as in there is no life in it. It's just a simple dry sound with no room, no echo, and it's just, there's no life in the sound. What I always start off with is by adding a reverb. And that's just because I want to give it life. I want to bring it into a room like this, you know, and like your own studio. Every sound that you hear on earth has reflections. And by adding reverb on it, you add reflections, you add walls, you put it inside of a room. And that's also why they call it a room in the reverb plugin. So I always first start off with creating reverb and creating a room around it so that it starts to live and starts to sound more natural to us, because we're not used to dry sounds, the human ear. So first thing is echo, or reverb, sorry. As you can see here, it's just a really small reverb, like a small room, a short time length, a really short reverb time, the dry is fully open and the wet is on 9%. It's just not that much reverb, but it just gives you an extra edge, and it gives you like a natural sounding way, actually. So reverb is the first thing. Then my second thing that I always try to do is the delay. As you can hear, this is it sounding dry. This is the echo. By adding an echo or a delay in this matter, you give it like a second dimension, as in, I always like to do this because it starts adding a flow to your track as well. It starts filling in those empty gaps that you have in your beats or whatsoever. Most of the time it just starts to work together. And as you can see here, I always cut out the lower frequencies and the higher frequencies. Of course, it depends per sound how you're able to do it or what you're gonna do. You always have to keep listening. But in most matters, I always cut off the lower frequencies and the high frequencies. And for the delay, I always only take like the mid part of it. The dry is also full open and the wet is just pretty low. But you can play around with this. Like I said, it's different for each sound, so you have to find your way for every sound. So it's not like you can save a preset for this. You have to fight your way through it time and time all over again. A third one that I always like to use is this one, the Guitaric. It's a guitar amp, but just to give you an idea, you have to start thinking outside of the box. Like, of course, this is a guitar amp and you should think it's made for the guitars. Of course, it's made for guitars, but why not put other sounds to it? For me, I always like to put my beats through them, because it gives a really different kind of crisp to it. It sounds weird. I'm not really sure what it does, but it just adds a lot of energy to your beats, and it makes them crispier and fuller and wider, and it just makes things better. So I always try to test it out on synths or on beats or all those things, just to see what happens. And 80 or 90% of the time it doesn't work, and 10% of the time it does work, and it adds a lot of beautiful stuff. So I'll show you a few of the examples. This is the original sound. This is with a guitar amp on it. You can instantly hear that the sound is changing enormously. And what I want to try to say with this is, try to think outside of the box when you're creating music. There are no rules, you know, just put different kind of things that are meant for guitars, just put them on melodies, put them on beats, and see what happens. Sometimes the most beautiful things happen by making mistakes. And this could be a mistake, you know, but you never know. And to me it really helped, because it helped me a lot in my production process. So this is also a great way to shape your sounds. reverbs, echoes, but don't think inside of the box, think outside of the box. Use different kinds of ways. Use your EQ perfectly to match EQ with all the other tracks, all the other lines in your production. There's just a lot of things that need to happen to shape your sound, but the main things to me come down to reverb, echo, and just adding something differently. So just to see what happens, for instance, just a guitar amp. During my career, one of the things that always came back to me when I was starting a discussion with someone, or when I was talking with someone about music production, one of the things that always came back is mixing and mastering, because it's such an important thing of the production process, and it's such an incredibly tough part of the production process, and everyone kept having problems with it. And same goes for me, you know, like when I started with music production, I never thought about the fact that there was even mixing and mastering, you know. I just thought it was making melodies and creating beats, and that was the music process, like the production process. But when you come a little bit further into the industry and you find out new things, you instantly notice that there's more than just music production. There's also mixing and mastering. And luckily, during my career, I teached myself to do it, because I wanted to get like a good product and I want to test it out at night at my gigs or whatsoever, so I needed to work fast. And from the beginning on, I always used iZotope, actually, like the iZotope Ozone. To me, that plugin always worked pretty well. It's easy to work with, has a nice workflow, it has a nice interface, it looks nice, so it has some nice nice presets in it as well. But the thing is, I never understood what the device was really doing. I just used a few presets so I was able to test it out that night. But I never really knew what happened at the back of the machine, you know, like I only picked a preset and that was it. And when I came a little bit more further into music production, I decided with myself to find out a little bit more about the techniques behind it. That was also the moment when I was on the music school here in Holland. And that's where I found out about mastering and about mixing and compression and limiting and EQing and parallel compression and all those different things that come to mixing and mastering, actually. And I thought it was interesting, but I didn't thought it was that interesting, as in I didn't want to make it my job. I just thought I needed to do it because I needed to make music as well, and it was part of the job. So I started focusing on it for that year on school. And after that year, I noticed that when I gained more knowledge about mixing and mastering, it actually blocked my creative thinking. Because when I had a creative idea, I instantly started thinking about, no, that's not possible because it needs to be compressed, or it needs to be limited, or whatsoever. And it blocked my creative process, which is of course completely bullshit, but it did, and it did block my creative process. So the minute I knew more about music production and about mixing and mastering, the more limits I started to give myself as a producer, because I thought there were several rules that weren't like not able to do or whatsoever. And like I think it took me about a half a year or a year to understand that there actually are no rules to making music, and that it's up to you to decide when you're gonna mix, or when you're gonna master, or when you're gonna compress, or when you're gonna limit your track. So to me, mixing and mastering, I've done it myself for almost all of my career, until the end, until like the year or two before I quit making music. And that's because I found out that I met a guy at the ADE, like the Amsterdam Dance Event, and he was a mastering engineer. And he told me like, hey, I can do some work for you if you want to. And I always felt like, no, I need to do everything on my own, you know. But I just felt like, no, it's time to send it out to someone else and see what he's able to do. Because I noticed that I couldn't get my track to the level that every other producer did have, but they hired companies to master it. So I decided to let it master, to bring it to him and to let it be mastered. And when I got the first draft back, I was just blown away, you know, like I was hearing the thing that I wanted to hear all those years, and I wasn't able to bring that because I didn't know how to do it, and I wasn't feeling that I wanted to know how it should be done. So that guy worked from that moment on. That guy mastered all my tracks for me, and it just cost me like 35 euros a track. So it's not that much. And if you look at it from a business side, it's a good investment, you know. Like you as a producer or you as a DJ, you have to be creative and you have to fill in the palette, like the color palette, and you have to color in all the parts. So creating melodies, creating beats, creating arrangements, and that's all the creative things. But when that's done, you get to the mixing and the mastering part, and that's like the engineer, the technical side of making music. And I've never been that good at the technical side of making music, and some people are, some people aren't. So I decided to hire someone to do it for me. And I would actually wish that I've done it way earlier, because it really helped me. So my tip to everyone who's having problems with mastering and mixing, if you don't feel like spending time learning from it to get better in it, I would just recommend to hire someone to do it for you, because it's really hard. It's like a really tough theory behind it. You need to have a good studio, you need to have good monitor speakers, otherwise it's probably not going to work at all. So it's really hard to make a decision, but I would just recommend to just hire someone if you don't feel like doing it yourself. You know, it's going to be a long way and it's going to cost you a lot of time, a lot of energy, and I would recommend you to spend those minutes and those hours into your creative process and maybe even learn piano lessons, rather than hiring a master or learning mastering yourself actually.